The knock came at 7:42 p.m., sharp and angry, like whoever was on the other side wanted the door to feel afraid before I even opened it. I remember the time because my phone lit up at the same moment, vibrating on the kitchen counter. And for some reason, that tiny detail stuck with me. I wasn't expecting anyone, no deliveries, no neighbors, and definitely not trouble. When I opened the door, Karen was standing there with her familiar tight smile, the one that never reached her eyes. She wore a pastel cardigan and clutched a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. Behind her, 2 HOA board members lingered on the sidewalk, pretending not to stare but listening closely. I already knew this wasn't a friendly visit. Karen didn't waste time. She told me very calmly that she had decided my backyard would be the perfect venue for her upcoming birthday party. Not asked, decided. She said my space met HOA standards, had appropriate lighting, and would reflect community unity. I laughed at first, thinking it had to be a joke. When I said no, politely but firmly, her smile vanished. She leaned closer and whispered that refusing her request would be unwise. According to her, HOA guidelines encouraged residents to support community events. She claimed my refusal could be interpreted as non-compliance. I told her that my property was not a public hall and that her birthday wasn't my responsibility. That's when her voice sharpened. Karen snapped her clipboard shut and announced she'd be filing a report. One of the board members cleared his throat and muttered something about escalation procedures. I closed the door, my heart pounding, thinking that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few days, letters appeared in my mailbox. Warnings, notices, language. So vague it felt threatening on purpose. They accused me of being uncooperative and disruptive to community harmony. Still, I stood my ground. No party, no exceptions. Then, on the evening before Karen's birthday, red and blue lights flooded my living room walls. A police cruiser rolled to a stop outside my house. Karen stood across the street, arms crossed, watching like she'd just won something. I had refused a birthday party. Somehow, that had turned into a police matter. The officers stepped out of the cruiser slowly, hands resting near their belts, eyes already scanning my house like they were expecting chaos. I opened the door before they knocked, trying to stay calm even though my pulse was racing. Karen wasted no time crossing the street, her heels clicking loudly on the pavement, her face glowing with satisfaction. One officer asked my name and explained they were responding to a complaint filed by the HOA regarding a potential disturbance and refusal to comply with community regulations. That phrase hit me harder than it should have. A disturbance? I was standing in my doorway, alone, in my own home. Karen immediately jumped in, explaining that I had been hostile, uncooperative, and had threatened the peace of the neighborhood by denying her a reasonable request. She spoke with confidence, like she'd rehearsed every word. I tried to explain my side. I told them she wanted to host a birthday party on my property without permission, and that I had simply said no. One officer nodded, but the other turned to Karen and asked if the HOA had documentation. She handed over a folder thicker than I expected. Inside were printed emails, highlighted bylaws, and notes that framed me as the problem. That's when things shifted. The officer's posture changed. Their questions became sharper. They asked why I was unwilling to cooperate. They suggested that hosting the party might avoid further conflict. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt less like mediation and more like pressure. Karen stood behind them, lips pressed together, barely hiding her grin. I told them again, clearly, that I was not required to host a private event for someone else. I mentioned property rights. I mentioned consent. The taller officer sighed and said no one was forcing me. But refusal could escalate. Tensions, that word again, escalate, as if I were the one pushing things too far. Then Karen dropped the line that changed everything. She said she felt unsafe around me. She claimed my refusal had been aggressive and intimidating. The officers exchanged a look. One of them asked me to step outside. As I did, I realized neighbors had begun watching from their porches. Phones subtly raised, curiosity turning into judgment. I felt exposed, cornered, and furious, all over a birthday party I never agreed to host. The officers told me they'd be filing an incident report and advised me to reconsider for the sake of community peace. Karen thanked them softly, like this was exactly how she expected the night to go. As the cruiser pulled away, she gave me one last look, confident and victorious. She thought she'd won. She had no idea what was about to happen next. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's smile and the officers' disappointed looks, as if I had failed some invisible test. By morning, something inside me had shifted. Fear had burned itself out, leaving clarity behind. If they were going to paint me as the villain, I was done staying quiet. The first thing I did was reread every HOA document I had ever received. Not the summaries. Not the highlighted sections Karen liked to wave around. The full bylaws, page by page, line by line. And that's when I noticed it. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, requiring a homeowner to provide private property for community events. In fact, one clause clearly stated that personal property could not be commandeered for HOA activities without written consent. My consent. Next, I checked my doorbell camera footage. The night Karen came to my door, the entire conversation was there. Her wording, her tone, even the moment she said refusing her request would be unwise. I downloaded the clip, then pulled footage from the police visit too. Her standing across the street. Her comments about feeling unsafe. All of it was captured clearly. I emailed the HOA board before noon, calm, professional, attached were screenshots of the bylaws, timestamps from the footage, and a written statement outlining exactly what had happened. I ended it by requesting that all future communication be conducted in writing, and that any further harassment would be forwarded to my attorney. That last word mattered. The response came faster than I expected. Not from Karen, but from the HOA president. The tone was suddenly very different. Apologetic, careful. They claimed there had been a misunderstanding and assured me no further action would be taken. No mention of the police. No mention of Karen's accusations. Just a quiet attempt to smooth things over. But Karen wasn't done. That afternoon, she posted in the neighborhood group chat, implying I had called lawyers to intimidate her and that I hated community events. This time, neighbors pushed back. Someone asked why the police had been called over a birthday party. Someone else mentioned property rights. The narrative Karen controlled so easily before began to crack. By evening, a different police cruiser pulled up outside my house. My stomach tightened, but this time the officers approached alone. No Karen. They explained they were following up on a complaint, mine. I showed them everything. The footage, the emails, the bylaws. They listened, really listened. When they left, one officer paused and said, "You did nothing wrong." For the first time since the knock on my door, I believed it. Karen's birthday arrived quietly. No balloons on my fence. No music in my backyard. No guests spilling onto my lawn. Instead, something else spread through the neighborhood. A tension mixed with curiosity. People whispered. Screenshots circulated. Questions were asked that Karen could no longer control. That morning, the HOA sent out a community-wide email. It reminded residents that private property could not be used for events without explicit permission. It emphasized respectful communication and warned against misuse of authority or emergency services. Karen's name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew exactly why the message existed. The silence from her side was louder than any apology. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside for the first time in days without feeling watched. A neighbor I barely knew waved and said she was sorry for how things had gone down. Another told me she'd had similar issues with Karen, but never spoke up out of fear. One by one, people started sharing stories. Not publicly, not dramatically, just honest conversations that had been buried for years. By evening, a small gathering formed, not a party, just neighbors talking on their own porches. Karen stayed inside her house. No guests arrived, no music played. The birthday she tried to force onto someone else dissolved into nothing. And for the first time, her power slipped. A week later, Karen resigned from the HOA board. The official reason cited personal matters, but no one believed that. The HOA announced new procedures, including limits on individual authority, and stricter rules around involving law enforcement. They even invited residents to attend open meetings. Transparency, they called it. As for the police report, it was quietly amended. The follow-up officers had documented everything. The original complaint was marked as unfounded. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No confrontation. No victory speech. Just a slow correction of a wrong that never should have happened in the first place. What surprised me most wasn't Karen losing influence. It was realizing how many people had been waiting for someone to say no. Not loudly, not aggressively, just firmly. That refusal didn't just protect my backyard. It shifted the balance of the entire neighborhood. I learned that night that authority only works when no one questions it. The moment someone does, it either proves itself legitimate or collapses under scrutiny. Karen bet everything on intimidation. She never expected documentation, calm resistance, or truth. I didn't host a birthday party, but I accidentally hosted something far more important, a reminder that no is a complete sentence, even when someone calls the cops to make you forget it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this crazy HOA Karen story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss the drama. Drop a comment below and tell me, What would you do if Karen came knocking at your door? And don't forget to like this video if you want more wild neighborhood stories like this.